Hello and welcome to the Creative Academy. I am Eileen Cook. We're here today for some blue pencil sessions, and I have, of course, my fine colleague Donna, and we have a guest person coming in today. We have Amanda, who is a part of the Creative Academy and is also an editor. So she was willing to help us out today because sadly Crystal couldn't make it. So today we're going to jump in and we're going to talk on a blue pencil that was submitted by Bonni Goldberg. And I think this one's a little bit different because it looks like it's going to be a handout versus the first initial chapters of a page. That's my take on it. But I'm going to jump in and start with you, Donna. What are your thoughts on this?
As a handout, I'm assuming, because we do know that this book is intended for, or at least Bonnie's hoping that it will be used in schools. So she's preparing materials for teachers. I mean, I don't have anything specific to say about it other than I love how it sums up a huge, difficult history in a way that I can understand. And I actually learned something here. Like I learned from this handout. So, you know, I don't feel very helpful here because it's working for me so perfectly.
So I do think, and we're sort of making the assumption that this is meant to be a handout. And the reason that I'm making that assumption is we have had a little bit of a sneak peek into Bonnie's world before. And we know that this is a character. So she's talking about the character Gracia, who becomes sort of a leader within the Jewish faith and is able to save a lot of the culture and people. And she summarizes what we know happens in the story in a very short amount of time. It's actually basically 3 pages because the last page is a little piece of separate information, just sort of an author's note. What I wanted to highlight, because I also don't have a ton of changes, is the fact that she sort of blended together a little bit of dialogue with the history. And I thought that that worked really well as a handout because it made it feel a little bit more chatty and approachable versus more strict textbook. So I like that she kind of pulled in these tiny little moments of a little bit of a scene where we see something. So for example, the mother says to her at one point, "Remember, Gracia, every person is a world. So if you save even one life, then you've saved the whole world," said her father. So one, that's just kind of just a sweet and a touching moment, but it also really grounds kind of what's at stake. So Amanda, I'm curious because you haven't had a chance to see pages before. So what was your take on all of this?
Well, actually, that's a funny story because I actually proofed the first book in this, which what I think is going to be a series. So I actually am familiar with Doña Gracia, or Gracia, however you pronounce her name. So it was kind of really interesting to see. Again, I think what she had to do here was a huge challenge. I mean, that she not only had to make it really short and she had to summarize it and get sort of these main beats, but she also had to make it's still story-like. And I like what you say, Eileen, she uses bits of dialogue, like just little impressions, even though this woman is traveling the world, there's a huge history here. And yeah, she still makes it like a story, which I think is going to be really good for especially younger readers, but any readers, I suppose, to bring them into that story. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think, again, I had very few notes on this, but the only thing that I guess if I had to kind of stretch for something, because there is such a huge history behind this, there were just a couple of moments where I kind of thought, now I wonder if like a younger reader will struggle with this because it hints at that huge backstory. So like, for example, she says, now that she was free, Gracia wanted to get back the treasures Jews had to give up when they were hiding. And it's like, that's just a little touch of this huge history about what these people had to experience and had to sacrifice for their beliefs. So there were just a couple moments like that where I was like, wow, that sentence might be something that a younger reader might glaze over because they don't have the larger context to put it in. But that's a very small thing. Overall, it was very, very condensed and very, very readable, for sure.
And I want to throw in, you know, I hadn't put together the fact that it was actually the dialogue. And as soon as you said that, Eileen, I was like, oh, duh, of course, it was the dialogue that made this so compelling. There was a spot in here where I was emotional reading it, and I was like, ugh. And then when I read the author's note, and that's actually the place where I'm confused, because the author's note doesn't feel like an author's note, but what it did for me, and if Bonni would be willing, I think it would be really instructional for others to be able to read what she wrote as the author's note, which is really basically just a summary of the history that she's turned into this very readable piece. So it was very much a mirror of the same thing, but written rather like, you know, a historical document, or these are the facts, ma'am, just the facts. And when you compare that to what she's done with the piece that is possibly for, you know, the teacher handout, I was blown away at how she took something that was historic and not as interesting or compelling and actually quite forgettable to me, to something that is a story that is stuck with me and made me feel something. So we should probably ask if we can upload both so people can take a look, because we know that people struggle with this.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's a great example too for people who are looking at doing either a query letter or some kind of synopsis around how do you kind of pick and choose those key moments that you need to have in there. My only piece of critical, if you want us to call it critical feedback, is maybe a little bit similar to yours, Amanda, just as there is so much going on, that there's a line in here where she talks about her daughter and she gives her daughter's name. I might just take that out, just because I don't think we need to know her name for the purposes of this handout. And there is so much already going on in here. I think it would just make it that tiny bit more clear.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point.
All right, well, if we don't have any other feedback, then we're going to say big kudos to Bonni, because she did an amazing job of summarizing in a very small place. And we'll check with you, Bonni, if you're comfortable with sharing with that. And for everyone else, if you have some pages you would like us to look at, whether that's pages from a scene or something from a first chapter, or something like Bonni has done here where it's a handout, then please submit it to our blue pencil and we would be happy to do so. So on behalf of the Creative Academy, thank you so much, everyone.
Bye.